So there was a lot of noise, obviously, when mobile first launched. Everyone was talking about it. And this is why I wanted to talk about it today, because like I said, I think it's one of the biggest topics that has been out there. You can just see when it was first announced by Google, and then kind of everyone started jumping on top of that, giving their opinions, writing about it, speaking about it. It was everywhere, mobile first. It was all everyone was talking about, really. But alongside all of this noise, all of this chatter, there was also actually a lot of confusion, which was quite concerning to see, because it's going to be this huge change. It's happening now. It's going to be really impactful for websites, but people aren't really fully sure about what it means. And you can see this by how Google actually had to come out with this 10-part Twitter thread to actually clear things up. So they launched it, thought they did a good job with it, but actually saw loads of people had kind of got the wrong angle on it, not really understood what's actually going to happen. So they had to kind of explain actually what this means in this really detailed thread. And I've actually put the link to the thread if you're interested to look. And I'm going to be sharing these slides on SlideShare later on the Deepcrawl account and my Twitter handle here if you want to go back and see any links that I've shared today. But yeah, so there was a lot of confusion. And obviously Google were doing their part with their official blogs and their Webmaster Central blogs, but also at Deepcrawl we wanted to kind of help clear things up, because to give a little bit of context, does anyone sit in on any of the Google Webmaster Hangout sessions? Show of hands, anyone? Okay, well, for the English language version, we at Deepcrawl, myself and my colleague Sam, we sit in and we take notes on what John Mueller, a Google Webmaster Trends Analyst, the advice he actually gives to webmasters, and we take out like the key points that he talks about and the advice he gives. And kind of one of the main things that keeps coming back is he's answering all these questions about mobile first. Every single session, someone again comes up with a mobile first question. So we thought, why don't we use some of this knowledge we've collected from John over the years we put together notes on these and some other industry research we've done. And this is where I kind of went away and wrote a white paper on the topic to kind of answer all these questions we keep seeing coming up again and again. So we launched this white paper earlier this year, and in this session today I'm going to be covering some of the key points from this, as well as some of the key things that have come up since, because that was published back in March. So we're going to go through actually what is mobile first indexing, so you can all leave here today with a clear understanding of what it is, what's going to happen to your website depending on the type of configuration you have, as well as the most important checks to make sure your site's actually going to be ready and it's going to do well in this mobile first world. So to start with what it actually is then. So to think about where we are today, let's go back to see how things have evolved over time. So we started off, it was kind of a primarily desktop world. Everything was kind of focused on in terms of desktop, and that was the main device. And then as mobile devices in general started to become a bit more usable in terms of internet usage and became better in terms of smartphone devices, then mobile websites started to be designed, and you could have kind of these dedicated mobile websites, which could be either served on these separate URLs or kind of generated dynamically on the same URL. And then it got a little bit more sophisticated, and that responsive design came out where you could actually have content that scales on the same URL but scales to fit devices, which was much easier because you had one set of URLs to keep track of rather than a separate mobile website and a desktop website at the same time. And then AMP was released, and this was so the accelerated mobile pages, which are these faster mobile results that Google hosts. And this started to give us a little bit of an insight into where Google was heading with this extra focus on mobile. And that's where we are today with mobile first indexing, because this has come out now because smartphone usage and searches on mobile devices actually overtaken desktop now. That happened a little while ago. And that's why Google's now focusing on this primary device. That's where all the traffic's, well, not all, sorry, where most of the traffic's coming from. They want to focus on that device, don't they? So this is actually the official definition from their blog post that they released on mobile first indexing. So they're going to actually use the mobile version of a page as their primary source of indexing content and how they understand things like structured data, how they show snippets. And I've included the link here as well, which will be available if you want to have a look at the entire blog post. It's quite useful to see what Google actually says this indexing change is all about. Now, this is one of the main things. You know, I mentioned that Twitter thread where Google had to clear up a lot of things. This is one of the main points of confusion I saw come up again and again, especially towards the beginning of the launch. So everyone was saying, oh, yes, we have to move all these sites are going to be moved across this separate index. And people seem to think that with mobile first indexing, there's going to be a new mobile index and your website will be picked up and put into this separate mobile index. And with a desktop index, it was going to be maintained at the same time. But that's not actually true. And this is one of the things Google's had to clarify a lot recently. So it's not going to be a separate index. It's all one index. It's the same one index together. And actually, Ola has given me a good introduction to this analogy. It fits in quite nicely with his talk because Danny Sullivan of Google, he actually came out with a tweet to explain how mobile first indexing works with an analogy. Because it's like a library full of books. You have some print books and you have some e-books, and obviously print books used to be the more traditional version. They were in the majority, but as e-books start to become more popular, you have one copy of every single book title, but as the ebooks become more popular, you're swapping out the print books for ebooks. So it's all this one library, but the content's slowly being phased out to favour the more modern kind of mobile devices. So it's a phasing out process within one index. So how are things going to change then? How are you actually going to be impacted? Because it's all good us all talking about it all the time, but what's going to happen to your website? So let's look at this today. So has anyone seen this Search Console message come through for your websites? Yeah. Yeah, there seems to be quite a few kind of big waves recently. Our site was moved over quite recently. It was very exciting news for us. But so what actually happens when you see this message? You might see this and then think, OK, great, it's mobile first indexing. I'll just go on with my day-to-day. But this is how things are actually going to be impacted. So if you have a desktop-only site, there's no change there, which you might think is interesting because I don't have a separate mobile website or anything. How a user's going to digest content, it's not like mobile friendly, but actually it doesn't have anything to do with mobile friendliness. It's just about what content is being shown to a mobile user agent. So with the desktop only site, content doesn't change depending on whether you're arriving from a desktop device or a mobile device. The content's still the same. I know the layout's a bit horrible to digest, but it's the same content, so there's no change for Google. Responsive sites, also no change because the content's the same. It scales, but the actual content, unless you have anything kind of fancy going on with design where you're having kind of content removed depending on which user agent it has, but that would probably be more along the lines of dynamic, but there's no change. The content's going to be the same depending on user agent. Canonical AMP sites, so does anyone in here, this is more of a rare use case, but do you have an AMP site as your only site? Anyone? Oh, no change for you. And separate mobile sites. Can I get a show of hands? Does anyone have a completely separate mobile site alongside their desktop one? OK, this one's for you then. So the mobile URL is the one that's going to be used for indexing. So any content you have on that mobile URL is going to be favoured over the desktop URL. And dynamic sites. Any dynamic sites here? OK, that's more of a rare use case as well, but the mobile version, basically what's shown when a mobile user agent accesses the website, whatever that user agent sees, that's what's going to be indexed. And anyone who has a combination of AMP and non-AMP URLs, you might think, oh, Google loves AMP, they'll index that. But if you have a mobile alternate, they're actually going to take that non-AMP mobile URL for indexing to prefer. So you might think, OK, there's this huge change now. Mobile's being preferred. Let's switch all our canonical tags and things like that to mobile. So that's pointing to mobile as being the preferred version because you have this setup existing, but that's not true. That would be absolute chaos for everyone to have to do. Google doesn't want everyone to change their entire site structure. So when you have this canonical tag pointing from your mobile to your desktop to show it's the desktop's preferred, you keep that. But the tag that's going to be more important with mobile first indexing is actually a rel alternate tag. So it kind of changes over that this is now going to be the most important kind of tag in technical SEO in terms of mobile first indexing, because as long as you have this set up, Google's going to be able to, even if you show your desktop site as the preferred version, the Google bot's going to come along, see that, see the tag to rel alternate and pick up your mobile URLs or mobile content from that tag there. So definitely check any configurations like that to make sure that Google's still able to find your mobile content. So that's great, but what actually happens with websites? Is anything going to change? And the answer is yes, potentially. Because you might think that rankings will stay the same, it's just a switching out of results, but this is where the issue comes out, in that if content is different on desktop and mobile in some way, ranking's going to change. Because if you think about it, if you were ranking for a particular keyword, particular good section of content, if that's stripped away on mobile, Google has nothing to rank anymore. They can't see it on the Googlebot smartphone for that version of the page. They can't index it. There's nothing there. And this is why probably one of the most important things to take away today is on the mobile version of your website, absolutely the most important content has to be on there for you to be able to be indexed and ranked still. And these are the main aspects that you should be maintaining across desktop and mobile. So you've got your content, metadata, things like markup, hreflang. If anyone has any international sites, you need to have that on any separate mobile versions. Your indexing rules need to stay the same, as well as images, videos, alt tags. And like I mentioned, just keep your canonical tags the same as well. And as well as these things just being there on desktop and mobile, they have to actually be crawlable and indexable for search engines as well. So you have to test that they're actually available to these search engine bots. Now you might think, okay, we just need to keep everything the same on desktop and mobile and we'll be fine. But actually, internal linking doesn't need to be the same. It needs to be kind of equivalent, but it doesn't need to be identical, because Google understands that user experience on mobile, you can't have this giant mega menu top navigation with all your different categories in there. It just doesn't work on mobile. So they understand that things have to be altered slightly for mobile. But this internal linking has to be accessible for users and search engines. So it can be different, but it has to be findable, as John Mueller from Google clarified on Twitter. Because what can happen here is something to also bear in mind for mobile first indexing, is that if you strip back your navigation a bit to make it a bit more accessible for users on mobile, you have to bear in mind that you're still linking to these pages elsewhere on the site, because you can actually create orphan pages. So say if you have a particular category that you strip out on mobile that you had on the desktop navigation, then if that's not linked to anywhere else, you're actually going to be creating orphan pages that aren't linked to anywhere, which is an issue, as well as potentially increasing the levels in your site depth. So how many different clicks or movements a search engine bot has to make through your website until it gets to the content. So these are something to consider here. Now, actually, one of the ways the title of my talk is about kind of thriving rather than just kind of hanging on there and getting through this indexing change, how to actually succeed in a mobile-first world, structured data is going to be really, really important. Because things are more stripped back. We don't kind of write SEO content that's just paragraphs of content kind of stuffed at the bottom, which was terrible practice to start with. But we don't just write kind of bulk content or anything like that. We have a stripped back experience for the user. So this also provides maybe a little bit more of a challenge for the search engines if there's less words on a page to understand what your page is actually about, for them to serve it to the right people in terms of intent. But structured data is a really good way of helping search engines actually understand what your content is, what it's about, and actually be able to serve that to users properly. So this is a quote from Dawn Anderson. She provided this for our white paper we published that I mentioned. So that's really interesting what she said there about helping search engines get rid of any kind of confusion there. It really helps your content stand out in terms of its purpose. So this is what I'd advise. Just be careful about stripping back too far in terms of your mobile experience, because you could be actually creating more problems than you think in terms of navigation on a mobile website and making things a bit too difficult to find for search engines. Because yes, the content needs to be included, but it actually needs to be accessible by users. So I thought it'd be good to go and look at some websites at the moment and see how mobile friendly are they really. Because it's crucial to have a positive experience on mobile. When you think about it, if you have a negative experience on mobile, 62% of people are less likely to come back and purchase in future. So that means you probably only have one chance to get it right. If you have a dodgy experience, the customer's never going to come back. All your kind of awareness, your branding efforts is wasted. You've lost that person. They don't trust you anymore. And then adversely, you've got 79% of people are actually more likely to come back if they have a good experience on mobile and share it and kind of get a bit more referral your way. So this is where you need to get it right. But I've had a look and it's not being done that well at the moment. So I looked at Google Calendar and Hulu here. The first one doesn't even scale to fit the screen. And with Hulu, you've actually got this really intrusive kind of start your free trial call to action, which they might think is their hero content or key element on the page to show, but that's probably not what the user wants to see. So I didn't think these were the most user-friendly websites. And I actually looked at Bing as well, and you have to scroll 2 screen lengths to actually, I know their hero element or their key content is going to be the search bar, but any related kind of news articles are really hidden down the screen, so that wasn't ideal. And then I looked at some kind of news websites and publishers, and I got nothing because GDPR blocking me, kind of these banners blocking me, and even with the ban at the top for e-consultancy there, you can't actually, everything else is black. You can't actually see any content, and that's something to bear in mind if you're serving these banners to let people know about kind of cookie consent and things like that. You have to make sure that your content's, for a user experience perspective, it has to be there, but for search engines, bear in mind that search engines can't interact with the website in exactly the same way as users. So depending on how you're serving these, they can't like really click the X to say, or say I consent or anything like that to go and view your content. So if your content's not served there in the HTML, in the code there, without any kind of JavaScript having to render it, that content's not going to be indexed at all for mobile. So that's really something important to bear in mind. So let's think about what we actually need to check, some kind of takeaways for everyone here. Can I just get an idea of who's an SEO or kind of manages the hands-on aspect of your sites? Yeah, a few? Okay. Well, I'm going to split this between, so either you're going to have to go away and do these things, or you're going to have to talk to your SEO team or your devs or something like that to give them some lists of things to do here. So this is what you need to do. If you've got a responsive site, you need to make sure any important resources aren't being blocked. This is an issue I've seen a lot with people coming up with questions about why their images aren't being served properly on mobile. Things are actually being blocked, so you need to check things like your robots.txt and things like that to make sure images, any JavaScript and CSS is accessible. And this was one of the most surprising points I found, because I've been had a site in the past that I managed that we had this old legacy mobile site. I don't work there anymore, but it can happen. Someone in the past thought it'd be a great idea to launch a separate mobile website, and then they kind of leave that, ignore it, and then design a shiny new responsive site. But the mobile site's still there sitting around in the background. But actually with mobile first indexing, that old mobile separate website is the one that's going to be chosen as the preferred URL for indexing. Isn't that horrible? Your new responsive site's going to be ignored on mobile, and they're going to go back to this old legacy site to index that, and that content's going to be indexed for mobile and desktop in the search results. That's really something to bear in mind there. Any dynamic sites, you need to check your very user agent HTTP header and actually make sure the right user agent, so kind of Googlebot smartphone and Googlebot, the desktop version, can actually get the right versions of content, because that's really important, because Googlebot smartphone needs the mobile content to index. And I know there's a few separate mobile site owners here, so the most important thing is serving the right versions, but with 301 redirect, so making sure that the right version is seeing the right version of content. And also bearing in mind that your servers are going to get increased activity from Googlebot smartphone, because their crawling rate is going to increase with mobile first indexing. So actually make sure that your servers can handle the extra strain that's going to put on them. And a few blanket things for every site that I think we all need to check just to make sure. Like I mentioned, test your robots.txt and see if you're blocking anything crucial for mobile. And like I've gone through there, just try out your website on mobile. See in terms of user experience perspective. I know mobile first indexing isn't about user experience, but I think we need to be more in a mobile usability mindset. So actually just test how usable it is for your customers. And also test your mobile first readiness by using SEO tools that support mobile crawling. Now, I know I come from so Deepcrawl is a website crawling platform, and I'm not saying that in a biased way, but this is because John Mueller, in one of these Hangouts I mentioned, he actually suggested this. And I don't want to come here with a sales pitch, I just know that this is the tool I use most because I work here. You can use other sorts of crawlers. I know probably some of you use Screaming Frog, things like that, but I'm going to go through some of the different ways you can use whichever crawling tools you want to actually make some of these checks. So for example, we released a separate mobile user agent to allow people to actually crawl their desktop and mobile sites side by side, and I'm sure other crawling tools have these functionalities as well, because this is really crucial for actually making these comparisons between what your linking and content is actually like on desktop and mobile, actually there to compare it side by side. These are some of, like I said, these are just some screenshots I was able to find from ours. So the most important things to look at here probably these are reports we have from Deepcrawl, so you need to look at kind of mobile links in mismatch, which is internal linking mismatches there, and kind of content word count mismatches, so you can see what's different there. And these are the key things you need to, so when you've used whatever crawling tool you use and you have these comparisons, these are the main things to be checking. So you need to look at pages that are flat out missing on mobile that the search engines won't be able to find for indexing, content differences, and click depth, how far away you're keeping your content from the search engines. And it's difficult to kind of cover everything within this time slot. So if you want to learn any more about mobile first or anything like that, then it's just available on our blog. It's just a free PDF that you can go to there with the link there. So let's think about the key takeaways, what we all need to kind of bear in mind with this mobile first indexing world. You need to make sure you're actually doing thorough testing. I know Google wanted to make us feel comfortable. They said, oh, we're moving sites over slowly. We're taking this easy. We're not going to move people over who aren't ready in terms of their website structure and things like that. And I know they gave this kind of blanket statement like, if you're a responsive website, you'll be fine. But I think we need to do a little bit more work here. We need to take more responsibility for our websites and not just put our trust in Google's hands there. I think we need to do thorough testing to actually make sure the mobile configuration is set up correctly. And also making sure you're running dedicated crawls on your separate mobile site or running separate crawls that actually kind of support that crawl from a mobile user agent rather than just a desktop as standard. And again, like I said before, make sure everything, absolutely everything you want to rank for is actually there on the mobile site, because again, if it's on mobile, that's what's going to be indexed. Once mobile first indexing happens, your desktop content won't matter anymore. Google won't see that. They're just going to look at your mobile version of content and then treat desktop as like a supplementary kind of area of crawling where they'll just check configuration. But the mobile content is crucial. Because desktop first optimization, that's in the past now. We need to be completely focusing on mobile because that's where the future is. Thank you very much.